Hey guys, what's up? It's me, MC Matador here, and today I'm bringing you my first video in 2 weeks. Yeah, I've kind of had a busy sort of thing. I wanted to get this out last Friday, but we designated last weekend to moving out of my dorm because now, because of the pandemic, my university has moved online for the entire semester, for the remainder of the semester through mid-May. And as well as that, I also had to write a 5-page paper that was due that coming Monday. And I also just got my job back in retail, so the one that I had when I was in high school. So I've just been a bit busier now, dealing with schoolwork, adjusting to online classes, having to move out of my dorm. I had this ready for a while, this review, which this review of The Beast at Kings Island, I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, I don't have a preference of what coaster to review, so I'm just going to do a random number generator, and this is the first thing I landed on out of my rankings. And out of the 168 coasters that I ranked, this one is the one I got from random number generator first. But I won't be doing all the reviews. I'll be doing something a little different next week, another countdown, but one that I think just piqued my interest when I was thinking about this. So without further ado, I'm sorry for not being able to upload for the past couple weeks. I tried to get this done last night, but it worked, and then I had to move out of my dorm the week prior, and yeah, it's just been a bit of a mess. But things are getting up, things are on the up and up, just as I stabilize further into stay at home and online classes. Anywho, on with the Beast review. As always, this thing will have 7 distinct categories, not having a launch and inversion. It will get a score each from 1 to 10, and I will give my overall thoughts about this ride in the end. Starting with the drop. Oh shoot. There we go. Or multiple drops. Apparently my keyboard isn't hooked up. This ride features 2 main drops after 2 separate lift hills. The first drop is right after, of course, that right-hand turn out of the station, going up a rather slow lift hill, and is a straight down drop into a tunnel. And it has a trim on it, unfortunately, but it's still a halfway decent drop. But the real star is the second drop. You go up the lift hill, you bank left, and you drop essentially diagonally into a insane helix, which gives amazing laterals. Doesn't really give the greatest amount of like airtime, but the amount of forces you're doing when you take a certain essentially a sideways or diagonal drop into a massive helix is one of the most like this drop into the helix is one of the most iconic moments on any roller coaster ever because I mean the beast is also turning 40 if it hasn't already very soon. So this drop is famous amongst coaster enthusiasts for being one of the most insane lateral moments on any coaster. So because of there just being 2 drops as a whole, and the second drop being especially good, it gets a 7 out of 10. And tying this in, this ride only does have the one intense moment, that being the insane laterals and the helix finale and going in and out of tunnels. I like just the fact that you feel faster than you're actually going because you're blazing through the woods. But really, it's just this ride is not very intense. It's high speed, straight sections and turns through the woods in the Ohio Valley terrain. And like I said, the Helix finale is a legendary moment amongst classic coasters, but this intensity doesn't even come close to modern coaster juggernauts. Like, basically any sort of GCI would have a greater intensity, or a CCI would have a greater intensity for a wooden coaster than this. And this doesn't even compare to steel coasters for intensity. But it still has a couple moments here and there, so it gets a 4 out of 10. Moving on, we have the duration. This is the longest wooden coaster in the world, and it has had that record since 1979 when it opened. This ride unfortunately artificially increases its length by having 2 very slow lift hills, to where even bugs cannot fly faster than you're going. In fact, on my very first ride, someone a few rows behind me got stung by a wasp on the first lift hill. I freaked out because I don't like wasps. But I was excited to get my first ride on Beast, so the fear quickly went away when I enjoyed the ride. Subtracting the lift hills, you get a net ride time of about 115 seconds, or a minute and 55 seconds, which is by far the longest coaster I've ever reviewed on this channel thus far, and quite possibly one of the longest coasters that I'll ever get on, unless I maybe go to Japan or something. This thing has such an immense ride time that it deserves a perfect 10. And this is the benchmark for a coaster that's long, if even a little too long. Moving on, we have the Airtime. This is not the main focus of the ride. There's a couple pops of weightlessness, but nothing too impressive. It focuses more on speed, terrain, and some lateral Gs here and there. But the Airtime is not really there. Like, you might get a couple moments of weightlessness or a slight pop of weak floater, but nothing really compared to the coasters that are centric around Airtime, say maybe even Racer or Mystic Timbers in the same park. Like, if you want Airtime on a wooden coaster, take the short walk and go wait in Mystic Timbers queue. That's where you get Airtime on a wooden coaster. Moving on with the Smoothness, despite this thing being over 40 years old, it actually runs rather smooth and smoother than coasters half of its age. Looking at things like Boss, or Roar, or Wildcat, or other kind of, or maybe even there's some coasters that are only 10 years old, like a quarter of its age, and the Beast runs smooth in it. Maybe the Voyage. I went there, but yeah, this thing can be a bit rough or a bit jarring in some spots. That the laterals in the Helix can be a bit uncomfortable, but it's far from the worst when it comes to wooden coasters. It's not as smooth as like a GCI or a CC, or some CCIs, but it is smoother than it is not really bad. It's above average smoothness, and especially for a wooden coaster, it's totally bearable. It doesn't give you much of a headache at all. And then we have the Restraints. This thing features the standard PTC boxcars. In fact, these ones are actually longer than your average PTC trains, if I remember correctly, with your standard L-shaped lap bar. I do not have a good track record with these lap bars. These PTC train lap bars, they were a lot more accommodating when I was like 12, even like in my early teens. But now that I've kind of gotten bigger, my hips have gotten wider, I've got some lanky, thick legs, and they're pretty bad, and I don't fit comfortably in the PTC boxcar lap bars. But they're far from the worst Restraints, especially with them being so common. I really started feeling these things are identical. Like, that was when I said in my Holiday World synopsis that all their wooden coasters use PTC trains, and I realized that, like, wow, I don't fit in these anymore. I'm gonna have a hard time enjoying the ride, or not enjoying the ride. I'm gonna have a hard time being fully comfortable in the ride, being in such a tight corridor with not very accommodating Restraints. But older Restraints tend to do that. Moving on, we have the last category, theming. This doesn't have much theming at all. It's themed to a woodland, mysterious beast terrorizing the area of the park called Rivertown. There's a few warning signs and like trapping decor in the queue, but nothing during the ride at all. But if you're willing to stretch, like me, I would say that the woodland setting, because beast, like, it's supposed to be a beast in the woods, is intentional theming to a certain degree. I'm not giving it a 2 because 2 is my general score for theming any kind of present theme in the queue. But because of the woods, I'm going to give it a 3. Not that it really matters. This thing is not focused on the theming at all. It goes off its name power and its ride experience, and that's it. So overall, Beast gets a total score, or an overall summation score of 37 out of 70, which, when you average that out, you get 5 and 2/7 out of 10, which is not too terribly far off from my score because I'm giving it a 6.5. Longtime viewers of this channel know that I really have a bit of a confliction with the Beast. I think it's overrated. I find it to be boring compared to modern wooden coasters, and especially with Mystic Timbers in the park, this thing could, maybe not obsolete, but it's definitely outdated compared to Mystic Timbers, which is a far superior wooden coaster. However, I do believe this thing is completely worthy of its Ace Landmark Award. It should be preserved and maintained as long as possible, and that this thing is totally worth a ride, maybe several, at least one per visit, for historical reasons. This is something I always ride when I go to Kings Island. I've been there twice, and I'm planning on going there again in 2020 in an Ohio loop. And I would definitely ride the Beast once or twice when I'm at Kings Island with my family. If we go there, if the pandemic is over by like July, or not over, the pandemic is settled down by July. So I would love to get. I was heavily considering like holding off this review because if I'm going to be riding the Beast again in in this year, that's July. If there's a chance that I can do that, I probably wouldn't have reviewed it. But my thoughts on the Beast haven't changed all that much. I will say as well that a little bit of the warning of the beast that I probably should have said earlier is that I have yet to get a night ride on this thing. I know the night ride on the beast is legendary, but typically I don't stay long enough at theme parks. I'm there from like open to maybe 6, 7 o'clock, maybe earlier if I have restless relatives who just don't want to re-ride things. Silver Dollar City, flashbacks. So that's my thoughts on the beast. I just, it's a good ride. It's worth its historical value. I think it deserves to stay around, but I don't think it's anything terribly special other than for historical reasons. So, if you guys have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscription. I hope you guys have a great insert unit of time here, and stay safe. As always,